Glad to be back this week for part two of my presentation on using formative in the ELA classroom. I did the first part last week, a week ago today. So here we are with part two. And if you weren't able to tune into part one, the three things that I covered last week were using a formative to get to know your class, getting a learning inventory on them. The second thing was to use Formative to upload a go-to graphic organizer that you've always used, and it was something that you want to enhance. So I showed you one on how to use it on the plot graph in ELA. And the third thing last week was using music in the classroom to make connections and tie in things with anything really in your classroom, whether it's a novel or short story or even a historical event if you're a history teacher. So I'm going to continue on with numbers 4, 5, and 6 today. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And so here we are. So part two. I'm excited to show you some things today that I have. And excuse me. If you didn't get to tune in last week, I'll introduce myself again. I'm Eric Bryan. I teach English at North County High School in Bonne Terre, Missouri. I'm also the instructional coach. So most of my day is spent being the instructional coach here at North County High School. I've been in education for 14 years. This is my first year sharing my time between instructional coach and the classroom. So it's been a really good change for me, and it's been an exciting change and a good sort of new stress, I guess you would say. And so I also am Google certified levels 1 and 2 certified educator, and I have just recently earned my formative certification thanks to David Kwan and everyone else at Formative. So it's exciting to be part of. So the first thing I want to show you is how you can compare and contrast two different works using something that you put together in Formative. Again, here's something that you can use that you've used in the past. You turn something into a PDF and you upload it into Formative. This is what I did. It's another graphic organizer. But if you want to take it up a notch, turn that thing into a PDF, upload it up there into Formative, and then you can add different questions and prompts in there. And so let me show you what I have here. When I was teaching a short stories class, I taught a short stories class probably, gosh, roughly 10 years. When I had this short stories class, I loved using different sorts of short stories that were a little obscure, something that the kids would not necessarily have had prior to getting involved in my class. And so during the teaching of that class, I found out that Alfred Hitchcock's classic film Rear Window was based on a short story called It Had to Be Murder, written by a guy named Cornell Woolrick. And as soon as I heard that, I knew I had to teach that story because I'm a big Hitchcock fan. I love everything that he's done. And I thought it would be so neat to bring that into the classroom. So then during teaching that story and coming up with all the lessons that I did, I couldn't help but notice that the movie Disturbia that came out, I think, in 2007, starring Shia LaBeouf before he went a little nutty, was very close. And I always had noticed that, but really hadn't thought about using it in class. Well, whenever we decided, or when I decided to do that in class, my students all of a sudden started saying, hey, this movie is really like Disturbia. Because as soon as I would do the short story, I would show the movie Rear Window. And so in order to bring in their interests into that lesson, I thought, okay, why don't I go ahead and use Disturbia? It can't be that bad. It's PG-13. These were juniors and seniors that I had in this course. So I devised this graphic organizer where the kids would compare and contrast Rear Window to Disturbia as they watched the two films. What I asked them to do was to put in something that was unique or something that they noticed that jumped out at them about each film, and they put them into these little window panes here on my graphic organizer. Um, they sometimes have a hard time getting through Rear Window because it was made in the 50s, and they couldn't stand the fact that the graphics were the way they were, but they got over it. Then once we got into Disturbia, then they would really see those common um, things going on in the movies, and then of course the differences as well. So this is what they would be looking at. I'll go ahead and go over to the student version to give you a glimpse into what they would be looking at. So here's what the kids would look at once they got into the assignment. And to get a better look, you can zoom in here on the actual document that I uploaded. They can read the instructions real easily and figure out what they need to do. So then when they go back to the questions, they put anything and everything that they noticed about each film right here into their little spots to the right. Now, once we watched both films and we finished Disturbia, we finished discussing it and everything, what I wanted them to do was to read a nonfiction article about what they had brought up to me about this being so close to Rear Window. As a matter of fact, the person who had the original copyright to the short story, It Had to Be Murder, ended up bringing a lawsuit against DreamWorks Pictures and Steven Spielberg on copyright infringement because he felt that the film Disturbia was way too close to the film Rear Window, which used It Had to Be Murder as its inspiration. So he felt this was copyright infringement. So I gave them, I have two links here, or actually one link and then one actual copy of the article. The link here that I have goes to another website that they can read the article at that particular website. The other option they have here is to zoom in on this page and actually read this article. I went to try to find this article again online so that I could link it. However, the article was no longer in its entirety. It was very strange when I found it. So I just left it here. So I thought it would be cool if the kids could read both articles. In fact, they read this one, the new one that I found, that I linked, and then read this one. And also to kind of get a little bit of a, or try to notice a difference that the writers of the articles may have taken with the whole angle on the subject. Try to see if there's any sort of difference in tone between the two writers' voices on what they believe went on in this litigation. So back to the question on this, what they had to do was to describe what they felt. Do you believe that Sheldon Aben, the man who had Cornell Woolrich's original copyright to the story Had to Be Murder, was justified in bringing that case against DreamWorks Pictures and Steven Spielberg, because Spielberg is the one who produced the film? So ultimately, the case was thrown out. The judge said, "Okay, this is not too similar." So that's where they are able to take that upon themselves to use some information that they've gained, using the information and using everything that they've learned and noticed as they watch both films, and come up with an opinion of their own. So that's comparing two different works, comparing and contrasting two different things that we can do with formative. So the next thing that I want to show you is how you can do close analysis with formative. Just anything that you've always done with critical thinking questions, you can stick in here in formative. The good thing with this is that whenever you take a look at the results page, you can see how well the kids did with their critical thinking, which aspects of critical thinking you might need to go back and reteach. Look for different patterns of how kids find their strengths and find their weaknesses. And so then you can address that with them after you analyze everything that the kids have done inside this formative. So in my Advanced English 2 class, I have a conformity unit that I like to cover. and it's all about the dangers and the effects of social conformity and what it can do. So in the I read the story Harrison Bergeron, I look at some music, and to sort of finish out the unit, I like to show my kids the film Dead Poet Society starring Robin Williams. When they hear that this movie was made in I think it was around 1989, they don't get too excited. They think, oh, it's going to be something horrible. It ends up being one of their very favorite films that we watch in class. And so if I had to do this over again, I would have my kids look at this formative at the end of the class period prior to starting the film so that they can watch the trailer that I have embedded here through YouTube as their sort of anticipatory set. I know I'm going way back to Madeline Hunter here, but it never hurts to have a little bit of anticipation on what's going to come up with in the classroom the next day. So doing it over, I think I would do that. I would have them watch this at the end of the class prior to starting the film. This year we just watched it at the beginning, but that still worked. So what the kids see over here on the preview side, on the formative, they are going to get the link here, the YouTube video to take a look at. And then once we start the film, these are the questions that I ask them to fill out as they watch. Now I give my kids the option of watching and filling this in at the same time. Some kids prefer to go that way. The other way is that kids prefer to watch the film just intently in class and then later go back and do these questions as homework. That's fine. I just ask my kids to do that, or to do it in the approach that they're most comfortable with. As long as they have their questions done by the due date that I give them, that's just fine with me. So I have a variety of questions here on critical thinking. Providing textual evidence is something big that I like to hit. And so when I tell them use textual evidence, you're not going to use the actual text, but you're going to use details from the film. So that's why I include that, because they need to know what to do and how to do this, pulling things, to support their opinions and to back up what they're saying. Because I think a lot of kids forget to do that from time to time. So as we get through the questions, I use questions also that hopefully don't give away too many spoilers. I also have a screenshot here that I took from the old paper assignment that I did with this. I wanted to keep the chart, so that's a little small here, but if they zoom in on it, they can take a look at the chart and look at what I'm asking of them. Here, I'm asking them to identify some symbolism from the film. And so then they go back to their questions and then they put what the interpretation that they found in the symbolism in those different instances in the film. The next one, I asked them to show me or tell me or explain to me what each and every boy, the main characters, did in the film to express their individuality, because that's a big theme going in this particular unit and in this movie. Individuality, become your own self. So I asked them to put down here what each boy contributed to the film, contributed to their group of friends, or what they contributed to the school. And even I threw in Mr. Keating on there because he definitely is not one to be left out. And then by the time they get to the end here, I give them two poems that were covered in the film that Mr. Keating discusses in his classroom. Oh, Captain, my Captain, and To the Virgins to Make Much of Time. I want the kids to make connections between what the poem says and how it relates to the film. So I asked them to read at least one of these poems, which are linked here using the feature Informative. So it will take them directly to the website where the poems are located. Once they read both of them, I would assume I prefer them to read both of them first, then make a educated decision on which one they want to use. And then in a paragraph here at the bottom, I want them to discuss what the poem means and how it makes a connection and draws direct ties to the film that we just finished watching. And I'm really, really pleased with the answers that I get on this question. The kids really take to this movie. They really, really like it. They really get I guess, in a way dedicated to these characters because they really, I guess, can probably see some of themselves in some of these boys in that movie. So they really like this assignment. So this is linked on that presentation. If you're following along, you can go ahead and clone this for yourself if you want to take a closer look, or if you want to turn it into something else that will work for your classroom. And so over to my next one, my sixth and final thing that I want to show you guys is to use video as supplements in the classroom. So pull in more video and use the links that you can grab from YouTube, stick into a Formative. And this one is on one that I did when I taught my mythology class. I think I mentioned this last time. I really loved my mythology class, and I had great fun with it. And during one of the intro lessons one semester, I discovered that so many kids were struggling between the difference between a legend and a myth. So I explained to them the difference. We looked at some different examples, and I had happened to mention an urban legend. And a lot of the kids were like, "What's an urban legend? What's an urban legend?" So I would tell them some of the stories in a nutshell of what urban legends were. And some of them were just completely unaware or unfamiliar with what urban legends were. And I thought, what perfect time to do an urban legends unit than now. So I threw this urban legends unit together and had the most fun doing it because I just love this kind of stuff. And so I'll give you the preview, the student preview version here. What I liked to have the students do when they came in was take a look at a video here in the first part sheet, basically, that I've created. This is a clip from a film called Urban Legend that was released in the late 90s. Pretty sure it was 98, 99, somewhere around there. And the professor in the film here, Urban Legend, puts everything into perspective really well and describes everything really well with what a cultural admonition is on an urban legend. And so I like for the kids to watch that video, and then they answer some of these questions. Some of them, they're basic, but then the other ones have to make them think what actually the professor is trying to say about what these urban legends are and the folklore behind them. Part two is to give them the actual link to a film based around an urban legend. This one is from When a Stranger Calls, the 1979 version. And they watch this. And then I have some questions here that tie back to the the first video with the professor talking about cultural admonition. And then I kind of have them assess the urban legend now to ask them whether or not they think that it would still be relevant today because of the phone call and everything with caller ID and everything. That might make things get a little more interesting today. So they really actually like this clip. When I showed it one time, they wanted to finish the movie. They're like, "Can you read the movie and show it to us?" So it's really funny. It gets them interested in other things. So then the third step in this worksheet, I like to give them an example of more of a modern day urban legend. This is something that came around in email a lot. And I remember getting something very similar to this when I was in college. When you get this email, and they're these chain emails that someone in your family sends you, and they're scared to death that you're going to get taken advantage of someplace. And this one is the gas trick upset, where it says service station customers are getting stuck by HIV loaded syringes attached to the gas pump handles. And so this person, who by name only identifies himself as a member of a police department in Florida, and which makes it sound legit, but piggybacking on a lot of the media literacy going on right now with fake news and everything, this is really important for kids to see, because they have to learn that anything and everything they see on the internet or through an email is not always going to be true. So this activity kind of makes them go through and assess the information that's given to them in the text. I asked them to try to find ways to really put the information to the test, figure out what could be false, legit or sounds close to being legitimate. And so they answer these questions. Why is the story not a myth? Big objective there in this particular lesson. And then I want them to pick two terms that I have copied here um, to show how it's depicted in this particular story or in this particular example of a modern day urban legend. Um, because they can really learn a lot by doing that, I think. So those are my three. I hope I didn't go too quickly for everybody, but you're welcome to take a copy of the presentation I have here for you today. If I don't have it in the description on today's webinar video, I will get it down there so that you can click that with ease and get that. And then all of these formatives are linked here in the presentation for you. So if you're interested in making a clone of any of these, by all means, take them and run with them. If you're interested in getting part one, if you were unable to tune in to part one, part one's link is right there, and to the recording, and then the presentation for part one is right here on this slide as I'm looking at it right now. So I will get those links in the description here for this particular recording today so that you can take a look at that later if you would like. I'm going to hop over and see if there are any questions or anything that we have. I'm really bad about that. I'm sorry. So let me see if we've got anything. Questions or anything that we have. Oops. That's not going to work. Well, if I have some, I will definitely get back to you. Seem I'm having a few technical difficulties here right now. So if you would have any questions about anything, there's my email address. Feel free to reach out anytime. My Twitter handle is also on there, so you can reach out to me there as well. So it's been a pleasure doing this for you, everyone. Possibly I'll be back another time, I'm sure, to do something else to a certain extent. But until next time, have a great day.